The boy pushed the plate away. Steam curled from the beans, but he only pressed his lips shut, eyes fixed on the table's scarred wood. His father's hand tightened on the fork, knuckles pale, jaw working as though he could force the child to eat by sheer will. The wind rattled the shutters, dry and angry. A knock broke through the room. Sharp, sure. Eli McCall stood, chair scraping the floorboards. He opened the door to a figure against the dusk, dust on her hem, bonnet pulled low. She carried a flour sack slung over one shoulder, her other hand gripping a cast-iron pan, as though it were both tool and weapon. "You the rancher?" Her voice was plain, even. Eli gave one short nod. She stepped inside before more words were wasted. The smell of travel clung to her clothes, sun and road dust. She dropped the sack on the counter, set the pan beside it, and rolled her sleeves to the elbow. Neither man nor boy spoke as she searched for the hearth. She moved like someone who already knew kitchens by memory. The grind of the mill, the feel of dough under palm. Soon her hands were buried in flour, water, and salt. The sound of kneading filled the silence, steady, relentless, like a heartbeat returning to a house that had long gone quiet. The boy's eyes lifted, just once. His father caught it. Outside, coyotes yipped across the flats. Inside, the widow shaped a round loaf, her fingers pressing, folding, coaxing. She placed it by the fire, covered it with a rag, and waited. The silence held until the faintest smell began to rise, warm and alive, cutting through the dust and cold iron of the room. The boy shifted in his chair. His stomach betrayed him with a growl. He flushed, hiding his face in his arms. Her hands worked again, this time slicing turnips, onions, a scrap of beef she found left on the shelf. She dropped them into the pot. The scent mingled with bread, building a hunger the boy couldn't fight. Eli leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. He'd hired her because someone in town swore she could cook, not because he wanted a stranger under his roof. But she didn't glance at him once, as though his presence mattered no more than the wind outside. Everything she did bent toward the child, every motion measured, patient, like she was waiting for something fragile to take root. When the bread came out, she set on the table, golden crust, steam breaking through cracks. She tore it with her hands, no knife, no ceremony, and laid a piece on the boy's plate. Not a word, just bread, warm enough to sting his fingers when he touched it. He hesitated. Then, slow, he brought it to his mouth. One bite, chewing. His eyes widened, and he ate again, faster, like a boy remembering what it meant to be hungry. The widow allowed herself the smallest smile, faint as dawn on a horizon. Eli saw it, though she kept her face lowered. The boy ate until his plate was clean. He looked at her, not his father, and whispered, "More?" She gave him another piece. Eli's throat worked, but he stayed silent. The wind pressed harder against the house, whistling through the eaves. Somewhere far off, a rider passed, hoofbeats swallowed by distance. The widow sat only when they were finished. She didn't serve herself first, didn't speak of the road that had carried her here. Her hands, raw from kneading, lay folded in her lap, while the boy leaned against her arm, drowsy with food. For the first time in months, the child fell asleep at the table, instead of cry himself into it. Eli cleared his throat. "Name." "Clara." "That all?" "That's all." He studied her, the lines carved into her face, the silence she wore like armor. There was something in her stillness, a weight, as if she had stood in worse storms and chosen not to break. The fire popped, casting sparks up the chimney. Clara lifted the boy in her arms, light as a sack of grain, and carried him to the small cot in the corner. She laid him down, tucked him in, and smoothed his hair with a tenderness that seemed borrowed from some other life. Eli watched. Words hovered, but didn't come. The bread scent lingered in the air long after. From outside, coyotes howled again, nearer this time. The rancher's hand drifted to the rifle propped by the door. But Clara didn't flinch. She simply banked the fire, steady, calm, as though no sound in the night could shake her. The boy stirred once in his sleep, murmured something, then settled. Clara sat back, eyes on the flames, hands folded, shoulders squared. Eli finally spoke. "You'll stay here. Bread's good." Her eyes flicked toward him, unreadable. I'll stay, if the child keeps eating. The silence stretched, filled only by the crack of firewood and the restless wind. And in that silence lay the start of something neither could name, like the first breath before a storm, like a story waiting to be told. Hoofbeats thundered down the ridge. Dust plumed, blotting the red sky, and Eli's hand went straight to the rifle. Clara pulled the boy behind her. No scream, no word, just a steady motion like she'd been waiting for this knock at the horizon. 3 riders broke from the dust, spurs flashing. Kane's men. They didn't slow until their horses crowded the fence, snorting restless. The lead rider, a thin man with a scar like a split river down his cheek, leaned forward in the saddle. "McCall," he called, voice like gravel. "Baron Kane says your Crete don't belong to you no more." Eli stood on the porch, rifle cradled easy but not lifted. His jaw worked. The boy pressed close to Clara's skirt, eyes wide. Scarface spat into the dirt. "You got till spring round up to clear off, or we'll clear you." The others laughed harsh, carrying across the flat. Clara stepped forward, shoulders squared. Her bonnet shadowed her face, but her voice cut clean. "The child's watching. You got business. Finish it plain." The laughter choked off. Scarface shifted in the saddle, uneasy, as if he glimpsed something cold behind her calm. His horse tossed its head. "Woman," he sneered, though quieter now, "best you keep the bread in pots." Clara didn't blink. She stood like stone. The boy pressed her side. Eli finally raised a rifle, not aimed, but steady. "You delivered your message. Now ride." The men wheeled their horses, though none too quick. Dust swallowed them as they vanished back toward the canyon. Silence returned heavy. The boy clung tighter, and Clara's hand smoothed his hair, slow, sure. Eli lowered the rifle, but his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, jaw clenched. Next morning, the air was still sharp with yesterday's threat. Eli hauled water at the well, his face lined deeper than the desert ridges. Clara was at the table, kneading bread again, the boy sprinkling flour with clumsy joy. "Who are they?" he asked, eyes big. Clara looked up, but it was Eli who answered. "Kane's men. They think land belongs to whoever shouts loudest." The boy's lip trembled. Clara's hand stilled on the dough. "Land don't eat. Bread does," she said softly, returning to kneading. Her words settled like a stone in the room. By noon, trouble followed. A riderless steer tore through the corral, branded with Kane's mark, dust and sweat flying. Behind it came 2 more, driven in rough, tearing up the rails. Eli cursed, running to cut them off, rope in hand. The boy cried out as the fence gave way. Clara didn't run to the doorframe like a frightened bystander. She strode straight into the dust. 1 calf broke wide, charging toward the open field. She swung the barn gate wide and slapped the post hard. Sound sharp as a gunshot. The steer veered, stumbled, crashed into the pen. Her bonnet fell back, hair tangled in the wind. Her eyes, hard as canyon stone, met Eli's across the dust. No fear, just knowing. By the time the rails were patched and the herd driven back, the boy was laughing breathless at the sight of Clara dusting her skirts, cheeks flushed with grit and fire. Eli only stared, rope slack in his hands. Night dropped heavy. Coyotes sang close. Eli sat sharpening his knife by lamplight, the boy asleep in the cot. Clara was quiet by the fire, mending a torn sleeve. "You've seen men like Kane before," Eli said at last, voice low. Clara's needle paused mid-stitch. Her eyes didn't lift. "Men who take because they can?" "Yes." "You didn't flinch." She tied the thread off clean, set the shirt aside. "Flinching don't stop bullets." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Eli watched her, searching for what lay beneath those few words. She gave nothing more, only the stillness of someone who'd already counted the cost of standing firm. Days stretched. Clara's bread filled the house with warmth, but shadows grew longer across the land. Riders were seen more often on the ridges, circling like wolves. The boy, one silent, began to hum again as he helped with chores, but always his eyes darted toward the horizon when hooves echoed faint and far. One evening, Eli and Clara stood in the corral, sun sinking red. The cattle shifted uneasy, lowing deep. "They'll come again," Eli said, voice like gravel. Clara's hand rested on the rail, calm. "Then we'll stand again." His eyes cut to her. He wanted to ask the question burning his chest, but she was already turning back to Boy, who came running with a piece of warm bread in his hand, laughing. And for a moment, even as darkness gathered at the edges of the desert, the sound of his laughter lit the ranch like dawn. Flames licked the night sky. The barn roared like a furnace. Sparks flung high into the dark. The cattle bellowed in panic, thrashing against corral rails. Eli ran through the smoke, shirt pressed to his mouth, shouting hoarse. "Clara, get the boy." She was already moving, dragging the child into the shadows of the house. His small arms wrapped her neck tight, his sobs muffled against her shoulder. She set him down behind the woodpile, her hand steady on his face. "Stay here. Don't move." The boy's eyes widened, tears cutting streaks through the soot on his cheeks. She pressed a piece of bread into his hands, the last of the evening's loaf, still warm. "Hold this. Think of nothing else." Hoofbeats pounded in the smoke. Cain's men burst from the dark, torches in hand, whooping, guns flashing. One bullet tore a plank off the porch. Eli fired back, the rifle cracking, dropping a rider into the dirt. "McCall!" Virgil Cain's voice rose above the blaze, cruel and sure. "This land ain't yours no more. Walk away or burn with it." Eli spat into the dust, chambered another round. The fire lit his face red, sweat streaming, jaw locked. He aimed into the night, but more riders came, circling like vultures. Clara stepped from the shadows, apron torn, soot blackening her face. She held nothing but the cast-iron skillet in one hand, firelight gleaming off its black edge. "Back inside." Eli shouted, eyes wild. She didn't move. Her body was still, but her eyes, sharp, unflinching, tracked every rider. The skillet swung in her grip, low and certain. Scarface spotted her and laughed, mean and high. "Look here, Baker woman thinks she's a warrior." He spurred his horse close, reaching low to snatch her. The skillet struck with a crack that echoed over the fire. Scarface toppled out of the saddle, teeth spilling with blood into the dirt. The others roared in rage. Guns lifted. Eli fired again, but shot rang back, grazing his shoulder. He stumbled, teeth gritted, blood soaking his sleeve. Cain himself rode in then, black coat whipping in the smoke, eyes like coals in the firelight. His pistol gleamed silver as he drew. "I warned you, McCall. You and your squatter-bred woman both." Clara's breath stilled, her gaze fixed on Cain. In the roar of flames, in the chaos of shouts, her hand went to the apron pocket where no one had ever looked. Fingers closed around cold iron. The revolver slid free, worn smooth with years. The moonlight caught its barrel, as though it had been waiting all along. Eli froze, eyes wide, blood dripping down his arm. The boy, hidden but peering through the woodpile, clutched the bread tighter, his breath shaking. Cain sneered. "You don't scare me, woman." Clara stepped forward, revolver steady in her grip. The skillet dropped into the dirt. Her face was bare of fear, her eyes carved from stone. "I buried one man already," she said, voice low, ringing clear. "Don't think I can't bury another." The riders shifted, unease crawling into their laughter. Cain's horse sidestepped, sensing the stillness in her. The standoff burned hotter than the barn. The boys' sobs stilled into silence. Even the cattle hushed, their cries caught as if the desert itself was holding breath. Then Cain lifted his pistol. Her shot split the night. Thunder cracked, echoing against the canyon walls. Cain's pistol fell from his hand as he slumped forward in the saddle, blood blooming dark against his coat. His horse bolted, dragging him into the dust. The riders scattered, fear breaking them. Some fired wildly as they fled, shots ringing off the barn stone wall. Eli's rifle barked after them, sending two more into the dirt. The rest vanished into the smoke and night. Silence, except the hiss of fire and the stampede of cattle breaking loose into the dark. Clara lowered the revolver, arm steady even as her chest heaved. The gun smoke curled upward, sharp in the nose. Her eyes never left the horizon until the last hoofbeat faded. Only then did she holster the weapon back into the apron's hidden fold. Eli staggered forward, gripping his shoulder, staring at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You!" His voice cracked, caught between awe and disbelief. Clara knelt by Scarface's body, pried the torch from his limp hand, and beat the fire at the barn's edge until the flames hissed down. Smoke curled, heavy but dying. She moved with the certainty of someone who'd fought worse nights than this. The boy ran from the woodpile, bread still clutched in one hand, and flung himself into her arms. She caught him tight, cradled his head against her chest, her face softening only for him. Eli stood in the firelight, bleeding, shaking, watching them. And in that burning night, he knew the truth. Her strength had not begun with the gun. It had begun the moment she placed bread into his child's hands and gave him back the will to live. The barn smoldered. Ash floated like snow against the stars. And in the hush that followed violence, the ranch stood, not whole, not safe, but alive. Smoke curled from the blackened barn, rising into dawn. The ground was wet with ash. Horses gone, cattle scattered across the flats. The boy clung to Clara's skirts, breadcrumbs still pressed into his small palm. Eli staggered from the well, water dripping down his blood-soaked sleeve. His face was drawn hard, but his eyes never left Clara. She was kneeling in the dirt, apron torn, revolver hidden once more, her hand resting on the boy's hair as he slept against her shoulder. The silence was deep. No wind, no coyotes, no laughter Cain's men, only the crackle of dying embers. Eli dropped the bucket, walked closer, boots crunching over scorched earth. His voice broke the stillness. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara didn't look up. "Because bread saves more often than bullets." The boy stirred, shifted, and sighed in his sleep. She held him tighter, her face unreadable in the faint light. Eli stood over her, chest rising heavy, the weight of the night pressing down. He reached into his pocket, pulled something small, wrapped in a handkerchief yellow with time. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from choice. He unwrapped it slow. A ring glimmered dull in the firelight. Plain, worn from years hidden away. His wife's once. He crouched in front of Clara, the dirt cold beneath his knees. The boy stirred again, but didn't wake. Clara finally raised her eyes, meeting his. The firelight caught them, steady, unflinching, yet softened with something fragile she kept buried. Eli held the ring between thumb and forefinger. His voice was low, raw. "Not because you fought tonight. Not because you bled for this ranch. Because you gave him back his hunger. Because you gave me back a home." Clara's breath caught, faint as wind on prairie grass. She looked at the ring, then at the child in her arms, then back to Eli. The hush stretched. The barn smoldered. A crow called in the far distance. Finally, Clara extended her hand, slow, hesitant, but she did not pull away when Eli slid the ring onto her finger. It fit him perfect, loose, but it stayed. The boy stirred awake then, blinking up through smoke-stained lashes. He saw the ring, saw his father's hand still holding hers, and for the first time he smiled without fear. Clara pressed her cheek to his hair. A tear slipped down her face, though she quickly turned into a laugh, so soft it sounded like bread crackling out of the oven. Eli stood, pulling her with him. His arms slipped around both her and the child, holding them together in the gray dawn. The storyteller's voice crept into the silence, low and sure, as though carried on the desert wind. "And so it was," folk said, "that a widow came only to bake bread but bound a broken rancher's heart with kindness stronger than iron, stronger than fire. They tell it still, when the night grows long and the coyotes cry, that the woman with flour on her hands faced down a cattle king, gave a child back his laughter, and wore a ring not bought with gold, but with courage and bread warm enough to feed a soul." The dawn spread over the flats, washing the land clean. The smoke drifted away, and the tale of the bread woman and the ring settled into legend, whispered wherever firelight flickered against the desert walls.